Hey everybody, sorry for the late start here, just trying to get everything set up with the streaming program. I have a widescreen monitor and makes things a little tough to stream so that people can actually see crap. Anyways, what I've been working on today is getting, so we have two repositories for OctoPrint that I interact with anyways. There's the primary OctoPrint repository with the source code on GitHub for the OctoPrint source code. And then the one that I maintain is the OctoPrint Docker repository that has the official OctoPrint Docker image. And what I'm trying to work on, trying to get set up, is whenever a release or pre-release happens on GitHub for the upstream OctoPrint, that the workflow in GitHub will run to automatically build and publish images, the entire array of images for the official OctoPrint supported tags to Docker Hub. So this will require, at the minimum, a workflow file in both repositories. GitHub doesn't really have a built-in easy way to trigger workflow events in other repositories in the organization. So both of these repositories are in the OctoPrint organization. And some of the docs I've seen on their site say basically that it's there to prevent recursion of like endlessly recurring builds. So basically they could do it, but they disabled it so that people didn't abuse. I'm getting warnings about video resolution, but how can that be? Okay. That is strange. I'm gonna go look at something real quick. Let's see what this looks like. That looks fine. I'm gonna go with it. Okay. Anyways, that made me forget where I was at. Thanks, YouTube. So where I'm at right now, and at this point, I've got this code sharing. So far, I've added a workflow file. Oh yeah, GitHub doesn't trigger stuff downstream. So what we've got to do basically is create a webhook on OctoPrint repository, and that webhook will send a payload to the OctoPrint Docker repository, and inside of a workflow in the OctoPrint repository, we trigger that webhook basically and give it the specific payload that we're going to pass. And the payload that we're going to pass is just going to be the event, which will be either release or pre-release. And so the that'll trigger what's called a repository dispatch event. And so in the OctoPrint Docker repo, we'll pick up on that OctoPrint or that repository dispatch event, and we'll verify that it is a release or pre-release from upstream, in which case we'll build the image and push the image. So I will, let me share. Thought I had. Actually, I can just share my browser and you'll see it there. So far, I forked this so that I can set everything up in one of my kind of organizations where we just kind of do some open source stuff. And I've done that so I can test everything here without having to actually build releases in the OctoPrint repository. And I will show you so far what I've got is this OctoPrint release workflow. So I've created this tags matrix strategy. And then I'm going down here, and basically what I want to do is we have this tagging strategy that we are going to put out there. So every time we do a release, we're actually going to release 8 different image tags. And I'll just pull that strategy up real quick. So what I'm gonna try to do is, so we're switching to Python 3 with this latest OctoPrint release. And the tagging strategy that we're gonna do is we're gonna publish the semver tags, both the X, Y, and Z, the X and Y, and the X, and the latest tag. For Python 3. I may also, or I want to be able to add in like Python 2 for backwards compatibility, but it's going to be easier to start with just to do the Python 3 stuff. And then what we're also going to be doing is creating a new image that's called camera. And so the basic image, if you pull just one of these tags, so this is our tagging strategy, it'll just be basic OctoPrint. No special setup or anything like that. But we will also be introducing a dash camera variant of each of those image tags. And what that image will be is it'll have OctoPrint and it'll have MJPEG Streamer, and it'll run both of those as a service. So we'll be using the S6 overlay Docker process supervisor, or supervisor for in-container processes. And that'll allow you, if you have like a hardware setup, it'll allow you to have a container that has everything that you would find on, say, Octopi. And coming back to our code here, sorry, let me transition back. You'll see where I have feature variants. So what I'll be doing is the first deployment of this, I'll do 2 pull requests. One will be with just this, with these feature variants left out. But the second one, I'll add in feature variants for camera, and that leaves room for future expansion. And what that'll do is allow us to create all of these tags pretty seamlessly. So right now, with just the matrix having these 4 items, it'll run 4 different, it'll basically run this build with variable substitution with each one of these tags. and I'm using the Docker buildx action, which allows us to use the buildx docker command, which is especially useful for multi-arch images. So we're building images on, right now we're supporting ARM 60, AMD 64 and ARM version 8, I believe. This is 64-bit ARM, and it'll publish architectural image for each of those. So just to show you an example, if we look at our tags here, you can see we're publishing for AMD 64, ARM v7, which would be like 32-bit, and ARM 64. So basically, if you have a Raspberry Pi 2, 3, 4, all of those will be supported. Or if you're using something like Intel NUC with Docker on it, you'd be able to use AMD 64. So that's where this image will start to provide benefit over Octopi, is that you can use it on different hardware. The other thing, and the reason that we're doing vanilla images and then images with camera, is that if you start to do a containerized OctoPrint infrastructure, what it allows you to do is actually have your camera on a different piece of hardware entirely than your OctoPrint server, and it will allow you to, instead of using the camera image, it will allow you to use an MJPEG streamer image mounted on into the same network and streaming volume. And that means that you can actually externalize your camera hardware, separate your camera hardware from your OctoPrint hardware, which could be really big for horizontally scaling and stuff like that in the future. Anyway, where we're at, or where I'm at right now, is I've got all the config stuff set up to run the buildx command, but what I'm struggling with is these tags. So the payload that I get back from upstream will tell me what the actual tag is. It could be 1.4.1, for example, which will be the next tag. It could be 1.4.1-RC3, which is, I think, the latest pre-release. And in order to publish multiple tags, I've got to parse out, so I'll use, in the matrix, I got to see which build this is. So is this the latest build, or which iteration of the matrix strategy this is? And if it's, say, the X iteration instead of the XY or XYZ, I've got to take that tag from that payload and just strip it down to 1, for example. So if I were to get 1.4.1, it would just be 1. I also need to be able to determine if I want to publish RCs or not. And so as I started to program this, is my audio working? Yeah. As I started to program this, I realized that this is actually going to be quite a bit of logic here, just in terms of like if-else statements, and that can get really nasty inside of this build step. So it makes sense to actually create or utilize a GitHub action for this, where I can just pass in as input which tags I want to publish. So for each run, I could say this is the X run, the XYZ or whatever, and then also be able to define, do I want to do RC runs? So basically it would ignore, if the tag is an RC, do I build it or not build it? Or do I add it on and publish that? So what I'm going to try doing is building a custom image. Now this isn't going to be an OctoPrint theme image, or action, sorry. This is going to be an action for semver tagging. So what I've called this is, the action I've called it is the image tagger. I may name it differently here in the future, but I've got a blank project here, and I am going to get started. So first I'm going to check to see if there's any comments. Oh, hey Jim, how's it going? Okay, cool. I'm also going to be on Discord, and if we had a good channel to drop into for voice, oh, there is a general voice channel. So if you're on the OctoPrint Discord server, I've just connected to voice there, and you can drop in there if you want to collaborate with me live. And if you're not part of that server, I believe it's just go to discord.octoprint.org to join. Let me check that real quick. Yes. Okay, so now according to, so where I need to start here, there's a couple different types of actions that you can create. There's JavaScript actions, there's Docker, or basically just defines how the action is executed, whether it's executed using Node on, like, say, an Ubuntu operating system, or if it's executed in a Docker container. The one thing I couldn't figure out from the docs is they don't state explicitly if if you do like a native node action, for example, if you use external dependencies. So if I'm going to be parsing semver, I know for a fact that NPM has tons of different semver parsing libraries, and it makes sense to use those instead of writing my own parser and going through all that code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to run it, publish the first version or whatever that's just a node based, a JavaScript action using that dependency. And if it doesn't work, then what I'm going to do is turn it into a Dockerfile one, and that way I can just, part of my Dockerfile instruction is just to run npm install, and I could even publish the image as the action image, and then in the action.yaml file I just define that Docker image as the base image, so that it doesn't have to do like npm install for the action itself in your own workflow file. So the first thing I'm going to do is create an action.yaml file. And let's see, we're going to go to Github Actions, documentation. I have to see if I can pop out chat here. And creating actions, let's try just starting with the JavaScript one. wants us to do an npm init. Did I do that already? No, I didn't. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, add a git ignore. Okay, and then I am going to, let's see if I have a remote yet. I don't. And this will require I do have chat popped up, persisted now, so that I can see it. So if you don't have a mic but you want to collaborate or have thoughts or whatever, just say something in chat and I'll see it. What was it I wanted to do? Oh yeah, I need to create a repository for this. So I like to create stuff in this Hacker Happy Hour repository. We're not, or organization, we're not an official org. We're just a bunch of nerds that like to chat with each other, and it's a good way to create projects that I can easily allow others to collaborate on. So I'm going to new repository, and we'll call this the other thing I want to do is just add a license real quick. We had a really good chat the other day in our Discord channel about licensing, and it makes me remember to choose my license at the start of a project. Yeah. So I got a question. Actually, I think the chat shows in the stream if you can see it. But yes, I like the MIT license just because I truly don't care for most things what happens. If I am writing a project that I think is going to be more usable, or that I'm going to have to spend a lot more time. Basically, I choose MIT whenever I want people to be able to collaborate easily. Um, if it's going to be a project that's more something that I'm going to be maintaining and pushing, I'll pick a different license, either Apache 2.0 or the Affero license. Just depends, but I usually don't do a lot of stuff like that, so most of the time my projects are MIT. Okay, so first thing we're going to do, install dependencies. So we need to npm init. Let's grab that description. I realize I'm not showing my code. I do that a lot. I'm sorry. I tried to do the auto switcher and it's not working for some reason. Entry point, I don't know where that's going to be. I'll leave it there for now. I'll just say jest, because eventually I'll probably get to the point where I test it. That looks good. Keywords, actions, semver, docker. That's good enough for now. And now the next steps from the documentation are to install the GitHub Actions. So I think I need I'm just checking out the docs here. So we'll go ahead and do this. And I don't need the README open for right now. Index.js, so it does look like that's where we're going to get started. And I'm just going to pull this right out of their docs. Require that's not action.yaml, that's my JavaScript file. Okay. Okay, so this is where we decide what inputs we want. So I think the first thing that I'm going to do is get... So the first input we want is basically the semver tag that we want to spit out the strategy. So what should we call it for now? Tag pattern, maybe? Or tag pattern matcher. So what you'll typically do, if we go over to the README, you know what? I have a table of contents plugin that's really cool. This would be usage, and this would be inputs. Apparently this is in there now. Breadcrumbs. The breadcrumbs isn't really what I wanted. There's something else. Here we go. Let's install this. And then I go back here. There we go. We got a fresh table of contents. Cool. So yeah, that's a cool little plugin that I like to use where, if, as you notice, it just automatically created that table of contents for me, and as I put outputs in there, updated that. So check that out if you get a chance. What I want to do here, want to create a table. So basically, given this would be your step, and it'd say something like name something like get tag, prepare tag, name, say refine tag or whatever, something like that. And this would say with, and what did we decide we wanted there? Tag pattern. We'll just call it pattern. Actually, this should come from have jobs. It's jobs. So basically right now I'm just kind of visualizing what the usage of this would look like so that I can kind of just program to that. It's not exactly test-driven development, but meh. Great minds think alike, Jim. That's all I can say. So this would be with pattern. Jobs, Docker image. I think this is actually indented. And then what you would do is come down here, you'd probably have a build image step, and ID would be something like build, and it would do run. And that's what that should look like. So given the input of pattern, you should get an output of tag. So up here, I need to add the matrix. So I think this is strategy, goes right here. Actually, first we would need to say runs on, we'll just do Ubuntu latest, and strategy, matrix, image tagger patterns, and let's say we do latest x dot y x dot y dot z. And then I missed here that this is steps. Okay, I think that looks good. Jim, if you're watching, does that look right to you? Am I missing anything? Or have anything in the wrong spot? Runs on strategy matrix tag steps name uses. Okay, so I'll leave that, and then that means I know so far what my inputs are going to be is just going to be pattern. So I can come in here, and let's look at core.get input. So we'll say const pattern equals core.get input. Guess it would help if I spelled pattern correctly. And then what we'll do for now, just to get something committed, we'll say core.set output what did we say the output was going to be? Tag. For now, we'll just do this. So we've got enough. This wasn't really just dependency installations. Let's say git branch dash m basic skeleton setup. Okay. What are the changes that I got to do? Index and readme. Okay, good. Okay. Now let's see, going back to the docs, what are our next steps? Detailed description. Check. Required input and output arguments. I wonder if they enforce this, or if I can do the usage. Well, they have usage, and I like this pattern more. If you like it, steal it. I thought it's appropriation. I like that. And let's see, we've got inputs, pattern. Yep, I thought so. Yeah, I hate markdown tables. They're cool, but so what I'm trying to debate here right now is if there's a way that I can do this without using the strategy. So this will create 4 different runs. Is there a way where I could just say strategy and you define, you know, latest XY, XY, XYZ or whatever here, and it outputs a matrix that you would then be able to build? I'm not sure. The first iteration, I'm not going to mess with that because I don't think that that's like the GitHub way. And so I'm going to leave it like this. And what you'll do is each time you'll feed it a tag strategy. And for type of string, what I might have to add to this table is just, this would be a custom type of strategy. It could be latest, it could be something like XYZ-OS. So other potential strategies. Check out my cool table of contents. It's got strategies in there. Love it. Let's see, potential strategies. I'm just going to list these down right now. It could be latest, it could be x dot y dot, or x dot y, x dot y dot z. OS. So the idea is up here, I could easily say, add to this x dot x dash os. Like that. Or we could just have an OS. Yeah, I'm not sure, like I said, inputting the matrix of what you want to build, I'm not sure if that would work because it would, well, I guess it could, because what we'd have to do is use the API to trigger a particular, like this would basically have to, you know, control your builds, and then I'd have to write a whole build action that supports all the builds and all the build stuff. Whereas instead, all I think this really needs to do is just pass. And so, for example, let's say this would use crazy max. When you say switch, are you talking about like a switch statement? Or are you saying something else? So switch screens. Oh, thank you. I hate that. I gotta figure out how to get that to work with Linux, because I think that's the problem. Anyway, it would be cool if in here I could say like strategy or something. Well, I think, so I'm thinking through this, like, if you define a strategy with a matrix, you're going to have, it's actually going to execute like it's going to execute these following steps 5 different times with these variable substitutions. And if I were to put something else in here, like say some other variable, and I do say it's 1, 2, 3, it's now going to run 15 builds. And if I were to put a matrix in here, down here, instead of up here, it's going to produce the same 5 builds 3 different times, if that makes sense. Now I think what we could also do is add in like a, you know, skip or something like that, some other parameter. But if we do iteration, I think that's one of the anti-patterns, is that you don't want to do looping. Of external contexts, of contexts outside the step in a GitHub action. So you don't want to do looping of contexts from the job, because you'll wind up breaking things for the way things work. And so I think that's why right now we kind of have to go with the matrix in this way, and then each iteration pass in what is the strategy for this iteration. And what it'll do is it'll run 5 times here. It'll pass in latest on one of them, OS on the other, X on one, X.Y on the other, X.Y.Z on the last one. And then if I you know, do the parsing, so say like my event payload has the tag of 1.4.1-RC3, and the strategy I give it, or the pattern I give it for the first iteration is latest, it's going to ignore that altogether. If the pattern I give it for the second iteration, for example, say is X, it'll just return 1. So given X, it'll return 1. Given X.Y, it'll return 1.4. And the other thing I need to decide is if so maybe we'll do pre-release. In which case, if it gets a tag that is, say, like a -RC tag, it'll take X and it'll output X, like 1-RC1, which actually that doesn't really make sense. We'll have to think through that one. Because pre-releases, you'd really just have like an if in here. So you would say if and I forget how this works, equals pre-release or something like that. Actually, you'd want it to just be release. The dash, there's no dash there. So this is actual syntax. So you get the action, and then there's a space, and you define, if you're doing like object, pulling out the object, you would use a space and then the key within the object. Or at least I read that somewhere. Let me look. they don't really make this stuff easy because it's like, oh, I have to go look in the jobs place to find out how this stuff works. Or I have to go, you know, there's nowhere where it's just like, here's our DSL. Because if you go to context and expression syntax for GitHub Actions, it tells you to go to workflow syntax. Like, thanks for the recursion in your documents, GitHub. That's good job. You can tell there's a little bit of the Microsoft creeping in there. I bet you got one team that works on a specific part of workflows and another team that works on another, and they're both responsible for different pages, and so they both just go check the docs for this other team. It's got to be how it works. But yeah, it's just a pain in the bleep that I can't just come in and say how this access works. Filter pattern cheat sheet. That's not it. Oh, this is where I've seen it. If you go into specific ones, they have a couple examples here somewhere. You got me wondering now. Okay, I can tell that, what the heck? Maybe. You broke me, dude. You I would have just happily figured out that the space didn't work when I went to test it and just fixed it, but now it's like I'm sitting here like, I know I saw that somewhere and I'm trying to prove that I'm not crazy, and it's making me look crazy. I'm pretty sure that they use JQ to parse this, and so it's like it's got to be filtering, because that's a JQ's filtering thing. I am starving. Okay, time to speed read. Alright, forget it. Okay, so we're going to go back and we're just going to assume that there's a dot there somewhere, wherever that was. we need to look at GitHub action events that trigger. Okay, release. So this is another place where I don't get. So they tell you, okay, here's the stuff that can trigger the events, right? So here we've got a release. And runs your workflow anytime the release. So see releases. And instead of showing you how I might access releases in my workflow, which, you know, since I was on workflows, I might, you know, want to know how something is used in a workflow. It goes and gives me the REST docs, and here's the JSON response. And then when I try to go into syntax, it's like, go see these other two pages. Each page points to each other. Context, GitHub, steps, runner, secret, strategy, matrix, needs, GitHub. Let's see, GitHub, is it event? The full event webhook payload. So yeah, I've got to go to like a third. This is like when relational database developers create docs, because you've got a document with the syntax, you've got a document with the workflow, and instead of like them having all the information for one or the other, you've got to have like a join, a third page that's a many-to-many relationship that has links to both of them. So if I go events that trigger workflows, this is github.event, and then if I look at release, and nowhere does it say, here's how you do github.event, and then nowhere does it say it's going to add the .release. So would it be github.event.action or github.event.release? It never tells you. Never tells you. Like, what the heck? What the heck is this? And you know, they could even do something as simple as adding in an example to say, here's an example. But nope. Nope, nope, nope. So there's event name, the name of the action currently running. So would I be looking for github.event name equals release? Object filters. Nope. This is getting frustrating. This is seriously frustrating. Okay, so let's see. So they have here GitHub event name is schedule. Events that can trigger is schedule one of those. I'm pretty sure it is. PQR. No, it's not. Yes, it is. Um, oh, so here's how you have to figure out that this is how it does stuff, because now finally you get to a context where it's like, here's the step ID. So it puts that out there. So now I need to infer that if this does that, then this other thing does the other thing. So I think I need to use event name. All this just for like a hypothetical. This is so there. That was fun. I had so much fun with that. This is the one thing that I hate to rag on it because I do it too, but whenever you're really, really close to an effort and then you create the docs for that effort, it's a problem that I see a lot where you're so close to it that there are certain assumptions and implications that you really don't consider because they're so natural to you. You've worked on it so closely that it's just like, oh, well, this is how this works. And you would never think that that needs to be explained. It would never just, occur to you that this little I forget what word I'm looking for, but it would never think to you to explain some of those pieces to users. And then the users get there and they see this documentation, which is awesome, but it's missing the glue. It's missing, like, here's what really puts it all together. And every developer does it. And this is one good way, to do things is to, like, come up with, here's a challenge, and then give it to someone that has the skills needed to complete the challenge but knows nothing about your work itself. And it's just like, I can tell when a doc hasn't gone through that because, like, that glue of how do I do this, jumping around. And this is this is still a fairly new thing, so this will get better. Strategy in Matrix enables access to the configured strategy parameters and information about the current job. Strategy parameters include fail fast, job index, job total, and max parallel. context do we have? Steps, runner, I wonder what's in the job. Container, services. Now here's the other thing I don't like is service ID one word. Is there supposed to be an underscore? Oh, it's saying service space ID. Okay, I gotta stop bitching now. Yeah, I forgot what I was doing anyway. Oh, yeah. Context and expression syntax. Expression. Be nice. So, here's the expression, but it doesn't give me anything there. Workflow syntax. If I go to if, it just tells me to go to context and expression syntax. That's no good. So where can I see an example of how this damn if statement actually, like what expression syntax? Ah! I can't get off this stupid documentation crap. Is this just YAML syntax? Maybe that's why they don't. I think it might be. So this is probably correct, but Okay. So that's got to be right. I forget where I was at. Let's see what Git says. Oh yeah. I gotta take out this some other thing here. I wonder if I am going to need to add in any sort of like, you know, if it'll have to be percent, like a parser to trigger. Or if you don't add in the percent sign and it's just a string, it'll automatically add a percent sign around it. Or you could define a percent sign, so you could say X percent dash OS, like that. So the percent signs are implied, but you can also explicitly what I'm thinking here is, what happens if I get a like some of these will only work on certain events. And this is only so yeah, a lot of writing code. So far, all I'm doing is writing documentation so that I know what to code. Have not written a lot of code yet, which I know is the exciting part for some people, but this is actually what it means to be a programmer. You might spend, this is what you would say is like requirements gathering phase. So you spend 10-15% of your time on any given project on actually writing code, and the rest of it's all planning, requirements gathering, testing, stuff like that. We'll think on this later. I'm not sure OS equals architecture, because I'm thinking that this would be So most of your Docker images would be like Slim Buster or something like that. And then the images themselves, you would have Buster, you would have that same tag in multiple different architectures. So architectures isn't actually something you tag for anymore. But that's a good thought. Okay, so the other thing that we need to think about is, so the example where I want to use this is OctoPrint Docker, and okay, so if I'm getting from release, so what I'm getting is one tag or one ref. Ah, so that's what it is. So event used so this would be okay, so when a payload comes in, it's going to look for tag event key used. There we go. It's going to look for tag, and if it doesn't have a tag, basically if it's not a release event, it's going to use ref or something else, unless you specify a key. So maybe that's an input. Payload key. String, maybe? No, this will try to be inferred. The key to use okay, so that'll work. It's not required, but it will be inferred. So we've already got a second one there. Or maybe we'll just say default event key. GitHub.event dot action. I think this is where it uses that syntax that I was seeing. So this, because the action is actually going to be release, and there's no way to specify inside the thing, like you don't know if it's you don't know what the context is going to be. GitHub environment context event. The name of the action currently running. So I wish there was just a possible, like, here's the event payload. But I don't know if this is accessed via, like, is it github.event. Looks like I'm going to have to Google here. GitHub actions accessing event payloads. Do I set a step as an input variable? I don't know. Can you be more specific? So here's the first thing I've seen where someone accesses. Here's that client payload. Here's how you access this. I don't even know. So this works if what's being passed is actually inside the actual, well, I don't know. No, this would be it does set an output variable, and I do that in other places too. That's how you do it. Like, that's how you use the native functions to set output so that you can use that output down here. But specifically this GitHub ref/refs tags is going to pull information about this repository, not necessarily about the product that's being built. And specifically like this being something that's probably going to be used on a repository dispatch strategy, the tags of the repository might not match the tags of the Docker image. So for example, you may version the Docker image differently than the Docker image tags themselves, if that makes sense. Because the product, so for example, my tags are going to be OctoPrint tag would be 1.4.1, even though this may be version 35 of the Docker file or the Docker OctoPrint Docker file. So that's where some of this is coming in. But that's a good question. That's a good point. I need to also keep that in mind on how that is going to be used, because I got to figure out a way to document that. It's a perfect example of what I was complaining about earlier, where I'm so close to this that in my mind that's not even a thing. Like, to me it's like, oh, it's obvious that that's what you'd be doing if you're coming to use this action, but it's not actually obvious. So it's probably a really good thing to document. I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, so I'm assuming GitHub event is going to be an object. Let's look at release. Okay, so I think this is the way that this will work, and if it changes, we at least know the strategy we're going about. Like if I find out that this isn't right, then I can change it, but this strategy should work. And this is going to be the same for all of them, so we'll assume screen swap. Thank you. So I did have it as all keys imply are accessed via the .github or github.event context. So, and this won't be default event key, this will just be payload key. We'll call it payload lookup key. Okay, we're getting better, getting closer. So we'll say release.tag default payload. Naming things is important. OS isn't going to go in there because that will be something that you would just provide via matrix feature. So my minimum, my V1 of this will just have this, but V2, if we look at what I created, so I have feature variants here, vanilla. So if what I might also be able to do, so where I have like feature variants, maybe there's another input where I can say, where I can use other matrix strategies, or I wonder if I could say something like matrix. You know what? I think I'm just looking to the future for this one, but like it would put out something else. But now that I think about this, you would probably pass that in. So anything that's not recognized, any string that is not call it. And this will be, so this is where we used dot ref. And that actually could be github.event. So there are a couple different things that actually have. So there's repository dispatch could have a tag. Release could have a tag. Couple other things can have a tag. I'm not sure what, but so I guess I do need to add back in here the context. GitHub.event. Yeah, it might. A commit might also be able to be tagged. But I'm not sure that that's an event that can trigger a workflow. It is not. So you got to remember that in this, it's things that trigger workflows or events as they get the repository events, basically. Which commit isn't a repository event on GitHub because it's push or, the way that GitHub sees it is not there's a new commit. GitHub sees that there's a push on a new branch. So push might be able to have a tag. Push does not have a tag, but it does have a tag's URL. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I was just looking at the docs and forgot to switch again, but here is that payload. So yeah, here again, we're getting webhooks. So this is basically going to be webhook payloads. maybe that's something else that I need to specify. I'm not sure if that's common amongst all the actions. I think it is. So I may not need to specify this. There's no harm in putting it in there for now. Because do we want the ref from the payload or do we want the ref from the job? And I think that's, yeah, we want the ref from the payload as a default. GitHub.event.ref. I think we'll do that. Yeah. No, this won't be github.ref. This would be... We don't even need to do job ID because that can be passed in anyways. We don't need to do ref because ref could be passed in anyways. Maybe. We'll see. Everything else, but so MVP, I'm just going to do these right here, and we'll go from there. Yep, see you, Jim. I'm about done with this part of the stream anyway, so I need to take a break. So this is where I'm at. So, what I want to do here is say, if you have image trigger patterns, we'll say X Okay, so I'm going to merge this, and then I'm going to take a break. I may continue this later, but I definitely need to eat and walk the dog. She's not still there. Hopefully before it storms. Let us go to Hacker Happy Hour. Let's say image tagger. I'm also going to put in here looks good. Okay. We will pick this back up at some point. Could be later tonight, could be tomorrow, could be next week. Just keep an eye out on the Hacker Happy Hour YouTube channel, or the OctoPrint Discord miscellaneous development channel for updates on the next part of this recording.